Have you ever wondered how far someone would go to fulfill a mother's last wish? When a lonely millionaire hires a young woman to pretend to be his girlfriend, little did he imagine that this plan, created to comfort his sick mother, would open his heart to true love. In a story of renunciation and emotional discoveries, what begins as a simple contract turns into a profound and breathtaking journey, where love not only heals, but redefines the lives of everyone involved. In the imposing silence of a mansion adorned with marble columns and antique furniture, each room holds a cold, untouched beauty. There, Alvaro walks through the corridors like a shadow among his own belongings. The walls stand as monuments to his solitude, as grandiose as they are empty, witnesses to an existence that he himself had chosen to keep away from the world. Alvaro, heir to a monumental fortune, avoids the social limelight, keeping to himself in a life without much emotion. His routine resembles a cycle of controlled appearances, with discreet visits to the few places where his presence is needed and long days without words breaking the silence of his life. In every gesture, he preserves the image of the successful man, unreachable and impenetrable. His fortune enveloped him like a cocoon, protecting him from human emotions, or so he believed. Alvaro doesn't just choose isolation, he embraces it as a necessity. Within this choice, however, there remains a subtle restlessness, a discomfort that settles into brief moments when he faces his own reflection in the mirrors scattered around the house. The eyes that return his gaze carry a hardness that bothers him, and, in an uncomfortable silence, he turns his face away, like someone rejecting an inconvenient truth. Life seems to go by without any surprises until a presence changes this scenario. Dona Teresa, his mother, an elderly woman in poor health, brings up a new expectation that invades Alvaro's daily life. Teresa, with the love and serenity that can be seen even in her slow gait, remains by her son's side, insisting that he find happiness in a lasting bond. Age and illness bring her closer to the end, and this desire becomes her only ambition. Teresa sees her son's wedding as her last chance to see him truly complete. In his heart, Alvaro carries the weight of his commitment to his mother, but also the fear of opening up emotionally. Love, with its unpredictability, has always represented for him an enigma that he prefers to avoid, a possibility that he rejects in the name of security. Even so, Teresa's pleading gaze begins to erode the defenses he has built up over the years, and for the first time, the idea of acting out of love, even in a single gesture, appears as a sacrifice he considers accepting. The silence that previously seemed impenetrable, therefore, begins to lose its value. Alvaro, in a moment of reflection, contemplates the proposal of a performance, an act that would fill his mother's need without compromising her heart. The idea of hiring a young woman to pretend to be his girlfriend was born as a practical solution, a game with defined rules and an expiration date, without emotional risks. He's looking for a plan that will satisfy Teresa, but keep his world safe from any genuine involvement. A rational choice that, in Alvaro's eyes, represents the safe limit for a promise that fulfills the mission of being everything to his mother and nothing to him. So Alvaro prepares to bring someone from outside into his world, even if only temporarily. In that mansion, where every object seems to perpetuate loneliness, he finds a glimmer of change, something small, but which subtly alters the atmosphere he has built up with such zeal. And by the end of that day, Alvaro already knows something is beginning to change in his world, and, even without realizing it, he is approaching the point where the defenses he had erected would begin to crumble. Alvaro emerges from his solitude as a presence with impeccable posture and controlled manners. At 38, his face bears the features of a man who has made his fortune, but who still preserves a certain restrained weariness, as if his greatest victory was simply surviving his own isolation. The responsibility of the family business shaped him from an early age, turning him into someone who knows discipline like few others. However, beneath the surface of the calculating businessman, a veiled hesitation emerges whenever he faces what lies ahead, a step into the unknown of emotions. His steady eyes, almost intimidatingly calm, rarely turn away when he assesses someone. And while many see him only as a successful man, few realize the emotional armor that accompanies his every move. The proposal to bring a hired girlfriend into his life carries a dose of Alvaro's typical coldness. He conducts this decision with the same rationality he applies to his negotiations, as if it were a temporary investment in a necessary staging. His only conditions become clear. The agreement must remain at a professional level, a show to cheer up his mother without involving any real ties. The role of the future contractor is limited to fulfilling a well-defined mission, while remaining on the fringes of any hope of a real rapprochement. And then Camila appears on the scene, a young woman of 28, with a vibrant look and a smile that reveals more than words. The interview with Alvaro takes place on a sunny afternoon, with soft light reflecting off the mansion's hall. Camila watches with restrained curiosity as he describes the terms of the contract. She knows that this opportunity represents much more than it seems. Not just a financial matter, but a chance to overcome personal obstacles and move forward. With no close family and a routine focused on temporary work, she absorbs Alvaro's proposal with a mixture of caution and genuine interest. Alvaro, however, remains impassive, maintaining a formal tone, as if he were talking business. Camila, upon hearing Alvaro's terms, feels a slight hesitation, a trace of doubt. But something in his fearless personality encourages her. She faces Alvaro directly, disarming him with unexpected sincerity. "Then let's do it with everything we've got," she says, and the intensity in her voice provokes a brief reaction in Alvaro's eyes. For a moment, he almost responds, but merely nods, maintaining the serene expression that characterizes him. Thus, the contract is defined, and the relationship begins under a rigid set of rules. In Camila, Alvaro finds a personality opposite to his own. She represents a strength that is not intimidated by the layers of silence or the formalities he imposes. Her naturalness and humor contrast with Alvaro's rigidity, and this disconcerts him. Little by little, he notices traits of someone who sees the world with spontaneity, as if nothing were final, not even his own sadness. And this vision seems to penetrate his defenses, although he hides any sign of surprise or admiration. The beginning of their relationship reveals the dynamic between the two. Camila has a natural talent for playing the part, adapting to Alvaro's demands. She chooses discreet clothes and elegant behavior, learning to speak more formally as he instructs. But even with all this care, little moments of humor slip through, provoking in him a lightness he was unaware of. Alvaro reacts to these situations with brief smiles that soon disappear, but each of these instances becomes a seed that challenges his absolute control over the plan. On one of these days, as he watches Camila interact with Teresa, he notices her ability to adapt to the family environment without seeming out of place. Teresa, delighted, compliments the young woman, and Camila responds with a light, genuine smile. Alvaro watches the scene in silence, and something in him begins to change, like a stone thrown into a calm lake, creating small waves that expand. These small signs of humanity in Camila awaken something in him that he hadn't planned on. Alvaro begins to realize, somewhat uncomfortably, that her presence goes beyond a contract. Instead of an act, he observes a warm, authentic presence that escapes his control, something that somehow begins to disarm the defenses he considers unshakable. Camila doesn't carry the emotional armor he has built up over the years. Her light and practical way of dealing with situations begins to create an invisible bond between the two, even though Alvaro refuses to acknowledge any kind of closeness. With each meeting, mutual trust builds gradually, almost imperceptibly, but present enough for him to realize that something inside him is awakening, even if he is reluctant to admit it. In Alvaro's life, few people occupy an intimate space, but among these rare figures is Dona Teresa, his mother, the strongest and most inspiring presence in his existence. At 72, Teresa maintains a posture of serenity and tenderness, even though her physical tiredness shows the weight of the years. Her eyes still reflect the brilliance of a time when everything seemed possible, and her age only reinforces the wisdom she has acquired throughout her life. Teresa carries a sweetness that illuminates any environment, a figure that compensates for Alvaro's rigidity with her delicacy. She shows constant concern for her son, never with harsh words, but with looks full of meaning. Donna Teresa has always believed that love and happiness are possible even in the most unlikely situations, and the desire to see Alvaro united with someone who completes him occupies a large part of her thoughts. Her advanced age and health difficulties bring a silent urgency to this dream. With every gesture, she transmits to her son what she can't verbalize, the request that he allow love into his life. Teresa believes in Alvaro's ability to find someone who will understand and transform him, and this hope becomes her last mission. In addition to Teresa, João, Alvaro's trusted assistant, keeps a close eye on his boss's day-to-day life, paying attention to every detail of the mansion and his routine. In his 50s, João shows unwavering loyalty, having known Alvaro since his youth and respecting his preference for distance and privacy. However, João notices Alvaro's emotional fragility and subtly tries to create opportunities for him to get closer to Camila. João's posture remains discreet, but he becomes a perceptive observer, seeing beyond the austere facade that Alvaro maintains with such effort. The assistant finds in Camila a young woman capable of positively influencing her boss, and, although he doesn't mention it directly, he tries to open up small gaps in the routine so that the two of them can live together without pressure. In one of these moments, João invites Camila for a short walk in the garden, encouraging her to get to know the mansion and the place where Teresa has spent most of her life. He shares stories about the family's early years there, describing how much Teresa loved the place and how she always dreamed of seeing her son build a family. These stories become seeds that Camila begins to absorb, understanding the layers of feeling that surround Alvaro and Teresa. João becomes a silent ally, someone who, without expressing opinions, supports the idea of a different future for Alvaro. With his careful presence and subtle words, João maintains his essential role in the story, but now, discreetly, as a bridge between Alvaro and the possibility of a real relationship. Alvaro's proposal takes shape with the same precision he applies to his business. During a silent night, he organizes every detail, pondering the structure of the agreement and the conditions necessary to keep everything under control. In his mind, the staging follows a simple script. Camila takes on the role of girlfriend for a set period, pleases her mother naturally, and, in the end, gets on with her life with fair compensation. He considers this solution a calculated plan, with no surprises or out-of-control emotions. So Alvaro prepares the initial contact with Camila, determined to keep the agreement practical, secure, and without any opening for the unexpected. The next morning, Camila receives an invitation to meet him. Alvaro, with his usual expression of seriousness and discretion, presents the proposal in a formal tone, as if discussing an investment. He calmly explains the rules, outlining the time, expected behavior, and absolute secrecy. Camila listens attentively, analyzing his every word. At first, a subtle hesitation runs through her, but then she realizes the weight of the opportunity opening up before her. The situation, however unusual it may seem, arouses genuine curiosity in Camila. She perceives in Alvaro something beyond the serious and reserved figure. She notices a kind of reluctance in his eyes, as if he himself were questioning the purpose of it all. This perception drives her to accept the proposal, not only for the financial gain, but also for the chance to unravel the mystery behind the man who avoids any kind of emotional closeness. With the agreement signed, Alvaro establishes a specific routine for Camila's visits to the mansion. He introduces her to the places that would become the settings for the fictional relationship, guiding her through her mother's preferences and the important details to build a convincing narrative. During this process, Teresa is charmed by the young woman, welcoming her with affection and gentle smiles. Camila, for her part, reciprocates with a genuine lightness, treating Teresa with a special attention that goes beyond what is necessary. Each encounter deepens the bond between Camila and Teresa, while Alvaro observes from a distance, keeping his posture controlled. He understands that this closeness favors the performance, but something unexpected begins to bother him. Camila's naturalness in dealing with her mother seems to touch a sensitivity that he tries to ignore. With each interaction, Alvaro is faced with a situation that escapes his planned control. He notices the sparkle in Teresa's eyes when she talks to Camila and realizes how much that presence transforms the family environment, filling it with a forgotten joy. The plan, initially cold and rational, begins to show signs of falling apart. Alvaro finds in Camila a figure who challenges his logic and his determination to keep his heart isolated. Teresa, observant and intuitive, rejoices at every gesture the young woman makes, as if she sees in her a part of her son that he himself represses. Camila's presence takes on an unexpected role, creating a dynamic that goes beyond the limits of the agreement. This new scenario causes Alvaro internal discomfort, a spark of something that he avoids naming. However, he decides to ignore it, remaining firm in his initial purpose. The contract remains, the conditions remain clear, and his life goes on wrapped in his emotional armor. He insists on not deviating from his purpose, but at the same time, a thread of doubt begins to entangle him. Something inside Alvaro senses that this approach has the power to reveal parts of him that he would prefer to keep hidden. As Camila enters Alvaro's universe, she plunges into a world of contrasts she had never imagined. The mansion, with its vast corridors and extensive gardens, reflects a lifestyle far removed from her own, as if it condensed everything she had ever known. Every detail shows careful sophistication, an environment designed to impress, but which seems to hide something behind its grandeur. In the first few days, she absorbs this new reality, adapting to the environment while remaining attentive to Alvaro and Teresa's behavior. At the same time, the simple, independent life that Camila leads outside offers the opposite perspective. She knows the busy streets, the neighborhoods full of life and challenges, where people connect directly and without formality. This reality gives her an authenticity that stands out in every interaction, something that Alvaro, bound by the rules and formalities of his world, observes with growing curiosity. Even without putting it into words, he sees the impact of this energy on his controlled routine and observes, without knowing how to react, how Camila's gaze reveals a less rigid and more vibrant world. Teresa, with her maternal intuition, notices the difference between Camila's way of life and Alvaro's universe, but sees an opportunity for balance. For her, this young woman represents a hope that her son will experience something new, a lightness that he himself seems to avoid. Teresa notices how much Alvaro observes Camila in silence, and in every interaction, she sees a glimmer of something that perhaps he doesn't fully understand. In her eyes, Teresa reveals a silent cheerfulness, as if she hopes that this coexistence will bring her son an emotional awakening. Camila begins to feel the weight of this expectation, but the gentle and welcoming way in which Teresa treats her generates genuine empathy. She doesn't just take on the role of girlfriend to please Alvaro's mother, but gets involved naturally, almost forgetting the artificiality of the situation. Teresa becomes more than a frail old lady to her. She appears as a figure of wisdom and serenity, who manages to offer Camila a simpler vision of life that is at the same time rich in values. The three of them living together creates a unique blend of worlds that would never cross paths under any other circumstances. Camila, in her simplicity, reveals to Alvaro a way of life that he was unaware of, while Teresa represents the hope that this influence will go beyond the barriers of agreement. Alvaro, for his part, feels torn between the rigidity that has always protected him and the attraction of something more authentic that Camila brings with her. The stage is set for an emotional confrontation, and although Alvaro tries to ignore it, something inside him already knows that nothing will ever be the same. Camila's first official meeting with Teresa takes place on a quiet evening, marked by an atmosphere of expectation and emotion. Teresa, sitting in the living room, watches the young woman's arrival with an attentive gaze, her eyes shining with an almost childlike joy. Alvaro follows the scene in silence, keeping his posture distant and observant. But every detail of that interaction affects him in an unexpected way. For Teresa, Camila's presence represents a promise, something he has never considered before. Camila's entrance into the room has an immediate effect. She smiles softly, greets Teresa, and approaches with a captivating naturalness. Teresa reacts to the gesture with uncontainable sweetness, welcoming her with a sincere hug. And in that instant, a connection is established between the two. Alvaro watches everything, noticing the positive effect Camila has on his mother. But he also feels a slight tension, as if something is getting out of hand. During dinner, Teresa is excited to ask about Camila's tastes, memories, and dreams. The young woman, with a spontaneous sparkle in her eyes, shares stories of her simple childhood and her aspirations for the future. She describes her life with a touch of humor, drawing smiles from Teresa and, at times, even Alvaro, who, although silent, doesn't hide his surprise at seeing his mother so happy. Camila's every word enriches the atmosphere, and Teresa absorbs everything with careful attention, as if trying to record every detail. At the end of dinner, Teresa decides to do something unexpected. She gets up with an effort, walks over to a small box on the shelf, and, with an emotional smile, hands Camila an old necklace, a family gift. "I want you to treasure this," says Teresa, holding Camila's hands with unwavering tenderness. The young woman hesitates, but accepts the gift gratefully, feeling touched by the gesture. Alvaro, watching from a distance, is surprised by the attitude of his mother, who until then had never shared this inheritance with anyone outside the family. The moment takes on an unexpected depth, creating a spark that goes beyond the limits of the original plan. Camila senses a new commitment emerging there, something that goes beyond the contract with Alvaro. Teresa's affectionate gaze seems to recognize in her a daughter that life hasn't given her, a young woman who completes a part of what Alvaro never expressed. From that moment on, Camila's presence in their lives takes on a new meaning. She doesn't just play a role. She becomes emotionally involved, absorbing the love Teresa offers her and returning it with genuine attention. After dinner, Alvaro and Camila say goodbye to Teresa, and the mother rests in her room with a satisfied smile, as if she had fulfilled a dream. Alvaro walks with Camila to the door and, for a moment, hesitates to speak. He faces the young woman, assessing her feelings, but opts for a brief farewell, keeping his tone professional. Nevertheless, what happens that night creates a new dynamic. He realizes, with some trepidation, that Camila represents more than just a plan to please Teresa. She brings an energy that begins to transform the environment around them. On leaving the mansion, Camila reflects on Teresa's gesture and the emotional impact of that encounter. She feels that she has accepted more than a job. She has accepted the chance to be part of something significant. And even though Alvaro maintains his reserved demeanor, she notices a spark of humanity in him, a possibility that perhaps that man who lives in silence and solitude has deeper feelings than he appears. The relationship between Camila, Alvaro, and Teresa becomes more intense as the days go by. The contract provides for frequent meetings, and Camila takes on the role of an attentive girlfriend, a careful presence and attentive to Teresa's wishes. Alvaro keeps his gaze reserved, observing without interfering directly. With each visit, Teresa is excited to ask about Camila's preferences, who, with a light smile and sharp wit, engages the lady in amusing stories, breaking the formality of the mansion. Alvaro, however, notices the joy that Camila brings to his mother, and something in him begins to react. One quiet afternoon, Camila suggests a stroll through the mansion's gardens. Teresa accepts the invitation, while Alvaro hesitates. She encourages him to join the walk, and, after a moment's silence, he decides to accompany them. Camila observes Alvaro's discomfort and finds it an opportunity to challenge his formal posture. She tells stories about her childhood, describing funny episodes, such as the time she decided to climb a huge tree and ended up attracting the attention of everyone in the neighborhood. Teresa laughs, delighted, and Alvaro, although he tries to keep his face neutral, can't help but smile briefly. During the walk, Camila proposes a run to the fountain, an idea that Teresa accepts, amused. Alvaro hesitates, but decides to walk towards the fountain, watching Teresa and Camila run ahead. He sees an expression on Teresa's face that he hasn't seen for a long time, a glow of vitality and lightness. At that moment, Alvaro feels something unexpected, a sense that perhaps Camila's presence will bring something he hadn't anticipated. With every gesture, Camila leaves a mark of simplicity, bringing humor and spontaneity to an environment that, until then, had been full of formality. In the evening, Teresa decides to tell some stories from the family's past. She talks with emotion about her first years with her husband and Alvaro's youth. Camila listens attentively, absorbing every detail, and, at one point, Teresa proudly reveals that Alvaro, when he was little, loved to explore the garden and invent adventures. Camila, surprised, doesn't hide her curiosity and looks straight at Alvaro, saying, "So, you used to be adventurous, I guess." Instead of looking away, he stares at Camila for a moment, his lips forming a restrained smile. This lightness in the interaction creates a point of connection between the two, a moment that Teresa observes with satisfaction. She notices how Camila touches on forgotten aspects of her son and, deep down, hopes that this will intensify. Every moment together increases this invisible but powerful connection, as if Teresa were subtly trying to bring the two closer together and provoke something in Alvaro that he is unaware of or resists feeling. Living together, however, begins to affect Camila more than she expected. As the days go by, she finds herself emotionally involved, feeling a desire to protect and support Teresa and, to her surprise, Alvaro. She is surprised to notice that the role of girlfriend becomes more complex, as now she doesn't just perform a function, but begins to create a real bond. This new dimension of the contract pushes her to do her best, but it also generates a silent restlessness in her, a fear of letting herself be carried away by feelings she couldn't control. During a family dinner, Alvaro notices the sparkle in Camila's eye as she interacts with her mother, and this intrigues him. He tries to remain aloof, but every conversation between them sparks something in him, as if awakening a dormant side. At the end of the night, Teresa mentions that Camila has brought a light into the house, a comment that Alvaro pretends to ignore, but which echoes in his mind. He reflects on the intensity of her presence, trying to rationalize what he feels, but increasingly unable to deny her impact on his life. On a night of heavy rain, after a meeting with Teresa, Camila says goodbye to leave, but hesitates as she watches the storm outside. Alvaro, on an impulse, offers to give her a lift home. She accepts, and the two walk to the car in silence, the tension in the air creating an atmosphere that they both perceive but avoid commenting on. During the journey, each remains immersed in their own thoughts, until Camila, in a light tone, comments on how the storm made the city almost poetic. Alvaro looks at her curiously, intrigued by her view of something so trivial. As he parks in front of Camila's house, Alvaro feels a hesitation, an urge to prolong the moment. She thanks him for the ride, and he responds with a discreet nod, but when he sees her get out of the car, he stares at her in silence for a moment, as if he's looking for something right now. On returning to the mansion, Alvaro is touched by a restlessness that grows inside him, a feeling that Camila represents something that he doesn't understand, but that awakens something beyond his control. Over time, Teresa notices Alvaro's movement towards Camila and encourages her son to open up, dropping a hint that he might find something real. He listens but remains firm in his decision to keep the contract as a purely professional agreement. Even so, every glance exchanged, every smile, and every conversation leaves an impression on him that resists control and rationality. This dynamic between approach and retreat intensifies, a dance between the two that Teresa watches expectantly and Joao, the assistant, follows in silence. He becomes a careful spectator, secretly hoping that Alvaro will allow something deeper into his life. With each interaction, He senses that Camila could bring her boss a change that he would never accept if he had to rely solely on a rational decision. With the routine of encounters, a new tension begins to emerge between Alvaro and Camila. Her role as his girlfriend, which initially seemed like a simple obligation, reveals a space of deeper emotions and expectations. Alvaro, although he keeps a closed face, shows more and more signs of closeness, which he himself tries to repress. This constant attempt to block feelings turns into a frustrating effort, especially as he observes the lightness with which Camila gives herself to situations, always authentic and spontaneous. One day, as he walks through the garden, he notices Camila sitting next to Teresa. The two talk animatedly, and Teresa's laughter, which echoes through the corridors, awakens in Alvaro a feeling of nostalgia, something he hasn't recognized for years. Teresa holds Camila's hand and confides, "You've brought my family back to life. I hope my son understands what this opportunity means." Listening to these words, Alvaro feels the weight of a truth that he is reluctant to admit. Camila's presence no longer represents just a contract. She brings life, color, and love to an environment previously suffocated by silence. At the end of the day, Alvaro decides to break the contract. He summons Camila for a private conversation, determined to put an end to something that he feels is escalating beyond his control. "I believe that our play has served its purpose," he says, his voice firm, although his gaze shows restrained anguish. Camila, surprised, stares at Alvaro, feeling that something important is being lost in that instant. "So it all ends here?" she asks, with an expression that mixes confusion and disappointment. His decision causes her a mixture of sadness and frustration. Camila realizes that the bond between them has taken on a complexity that Alvaro, in his rigidity, is afraid to explore. She says goodbye, leaving the room with a feeling of emptiness, as if the surrounding air had lost some of the warmth she herself had brought. Over the next few days, Camila's absence creates a heavier silence than usual. Teresa, who realizes the impact of this decision on her son, questions him. "Why deny something that clearly transforms your life?" In response, Alvaro looks away, refusing to acknowledge any vulnerability. However, Camila's absence destabilizes him. He tries to carry on with his routine, but every detail reminds him of her. The garden, the dining room, Teresa's laughter. These echoes of Camila's presence confront him with an emotional reality he had never admitted. Alvaro begins to wonder whether the decision to break off the contract was in fact a rational choice, or an impulse motivated by the fear of opening his heart. Teresa, realizing her son's dilemma, encourages him to reconsider his choices. With a mixture of resistance and anguish, Alvaro decides to go to Camila's apartment. When he arrives, he hesitates for a few moments before knocking on the door. When she opens the door, her expression reveals a restrained surprise, as if she had been waiting for this moment without knowing exactly what to expect. Alvaro candidly reveals, "I didn't expect to feel this way. I didn't imagine that this contract would reveal something about me that I didn't know." Camila stares at him in silence, sensing the sincerity in his words. This encounter represents a turning point, as Alvaro confronts his own feelings for the first time. He recognizes that Camila's presence not only alters Teresa's routine, but also changes his own view of the world. "I don't want this to end as a simple contract. I know that this goes beyond any agreement we had planned." Camila, listening, understands Alvaro's dilemma. She sees in him a sincere attempt to make room for something new, although she realizes the fear of a man who has spent his life building walls around his heart. The decision to get back together this time comes without a contract or clauses. Alvaro proposes that Camila visit Teresa again, without any formal obligations, allowing things to flow naturally. She accepts, and the two find themselves in a new dynamic where closeness grows without pressure. This return transforms the atmosphere in the mansion. When Teresa sees Camila in her home again, she gives a discreet smile, as if she understands the depth of her choice. From that moment on, Alvaro begins to allow real feelings to manifest themselves. He, who previously avoided prolonged interactions, now approaches Camila more openly. On a quiet evening, the two of them talk in the garden, and Alvaro shares stories from his youth that he had never mentioned. Camila listens with interest, as if deciphering a riddle with every word. At that moment, Alvaro's rigid countenance crumbles, revealing a side that he had kept hidden. Their interactions became more and more intense. Camila, who was initially hesitant to accept his return, now realizes that Alvaro is willing to face his fear of giving himself up. He allows himself to express affection, albeit in a restrained way, and each gesture reveals the beginning of a love that arises unexpectedly. Teresa, watching the two of them, feels that the house is recovering a forgotten joy, an energy that goes beyond the limits of a simple formal relationship. Alvaro, as he opens up to this new reality, recognizes the importance of living something true, of connecting with someone in an authentic way. He realizes that the emotional barriers he has built up, while protecting him, also limit the possibility of living fully. He approaches Camila more and more sincerely, as someone who is looking for meaning in his existence beyond business and wealth. Over time, Alvaro begins to face his own fears. He admits that his feelings for Camila are growing, and for the first time, he allows himself to desire something he can't control. This new phase provokes a profound transformation in him, which Teresa and Camila follow in silence, watching him get closer every day to a life that is less lonely and more full of meaning. This is the moment that changes everything. Alvaro, once fearful, accepts that love can fill the void he had never allowed anyone to touch. Teresa's health shows signs of fragility. Alvaro and Camila, realizing the situation, join forces to take care of her with all their attention and affection. Teresa, however, doesn't complain, maintaining the same calm smile full of gratitude. She watches them both with eyes that reveal the peace of someone who has found what they wanted most. Alvaro, by his mother's side, reflects on her sacrifices and the unconditional love she has always offered, regardless of his choices. Teresa's every gesture reflects a sweetness that now awakens in Alvaro a mixture of love and regret. One quiet afternoon, while Teresa rests in her room, Alvaro and Camila sit in the living room. An atmosphere of mutual understanding takes over the room, a silent bond between them that, until then, had never manifested itself so clearly. Alvaro, looking down at his hands, finally decides to express something he has in his heart. I feel like I've always kept my distance out of fear of losing control. But now, I realize that Teresa's love for us defies any barrier. He pauses, staring at Camila with an intensity that leaves her speechless. Her presence has brought something I never imagined possible, and all of that includes you. Camila, touched by Alvaro's sincerity, moves closer, feeling that the moment demands total transparency. She answers calmly, but the emotion in her voice is evident. I never imagined that this contract would bring us here either. But, like Teresa, I see something in you that deserves much more than distance. I want to be by your side, for real. Her words create an immediate connection, and they both look at each other with a silent understanding, almost as if all their insecurities and reservations dissolve there. The relationship between Alvaro and Camila takes on a new dimension, without masks or barriers. When Teresa sees the change between the two of them, she feels at peace and her smile reveals genuine happiness. She understands that her son has finally found something that was missing, and this is reflected in the harmony between them. Teresa now embraces Camila with the affection of one who welcomes a daughter, feeling that everything around her is complete. The atmosphere of joy, however, is interrupted when Teresa's health takes a sudden turn for the worse. Alvaro senses the urgency of the moment and stays by his mother's side, holding her hand as carefully as she has always looked after him. Camila remains by his side, silently supporting him. Teresa, her gaze still serene, murmurs words of encouragement to her son, saying that the love they have found overcomes any fear, and that she leaves with her heart at peace for seeing him next to someone who truly understands and cares for him. Alvaro, in restrained tears, absorbs every word, feeling the farewell approaching. Teresa closes her eyes, letting tiredness take over, and one last smile remains on her face. Next to her, Alvaro and Camila embrace, finding mutual support in each other's presence. Teresa's death then becomes the definitive moment that unites the two in an emotional depth that transcends understanding, something that only the two of them understand. After Teresa's departure, the mansion takes on a different kind of silence, a stillness that reflects both her absence and the new bond between Alvaro and Camila. He, although shaken by grief, finds strength at her side. Instead of closing in on his pain, Alvaro allows himself to express his longing, and Camila, with her constant presence, becomes a source of support. They face grief together, living through it without running away from it, in a union that grows stronger every day. Alvaro begins to understand his mother's lessons, every word and gesture she passed on in life. From these memories, he decides to honor her love not just by keeping memories, but by living according to what Teresa always wanted for him, an authentic life, where he allows himself to love and be loved. Alongside Camila, Alvaro finds the space for this new beginning, and together they seek to build a life that values the emotional ties he once avoided. On a quiet evening, Alvaro invites Camila for a walk in the garden, the same one where Teresa has so often watched them with hope. He holds her hand, walking in silence, absorbing the environment that now carries memories of his mother, but also a renewed meaning. Alvaro turns to Camila and, with an expression of serenity, says, "I believe that by making room for love, I find the strength that I have always lacked." Teresa gave us more than a temporary union. She gave us a new purpose. Camila looks at him with emotion, and a smile appears on her face. She realizes that this man, once closed and resistant, has now become someone willing to build something real. She hugs him, feeling that Teresa is somehow by their side, guiding them through every decision. The mansion, once a symbol of solitude and control, becomes a place of welcome and love, a place where Alvaro and Camila begin a new phase, full of plans and possibilities. Camila's presence offers Alvaro a perspective on the future that he had never considered before. With his grief still present, but no longer allowing pain to become a barrier, he decides that Teresa's love represents the bridge to this new life. He wants to honor her emotional legacy by building a relationship with Camila based on authenticity and surrender, where they can both grow without fear of facing their own vulnerabilities. Love, which used to cause him fear, now appears as a new beginning, and Alvaro feels that he has finally found the peace he has been looking for. He and Camila, hand in hand, commit themselves to transforming the house into a real home, where Teresa's memories inspire the happiness she always wanted for them. And with each step, Alvaro realizes that the sacrifice of opening his heart brings, in return, the fullness of a life lived fully and truly. Days after Teresa's departure, Alvaro and Camila reorganize life in the mansion, where every detail now reflects her presence and memories. Grief persists, but the sense of peace grows stronger, sustained by the love that unites them. Alvaro, for the first time, sees the house as a home and not as a cold, lonely refuge. Camila, by his side, represents the promise of a future built with purpose and meaning. That morning, Alvaro invites Camila for coffee in the garden. They walk together across the lawn, and he turns to her with a calm but determined look. "I want you to stay by my side, no longer as someone who fulfills an agreement, but as someone who shares a life. I want this home to represent something real, where we can honor everything Teresa taught us." Camila, her eyes shining, replies with a smile that reveals more than words. She understands the depth of what Alvaro is proposing, recognizing the effort he is making to give himself over to something he used to avoid. Without hesitation, she takes his hand in a gesture that seals the commitment between them. The mansion, once marked by isolation, now welcomes a new cycle. Alvaro and Camila reshape the space, transforming it into a living environment with laughter and memories that reflect the joy and affection Teresa has always longed for. With every gesture, they build a life together, cherishing the love they have learned to cultivate. On a starry night, Alvaro approaches Camila and, with a sincere look, thanks her for her presence in his life. He recognizes that the decision to open his heart has brought him not only peace, but also a fulfillment he never imagined possible. Together, they look to the future with the certainty of facing whatever comes their way, strengthened by love and mutual understanding. Alongside Camila, Alvaro discovers the beauty of living without reservations, accepting that love builds the meaning he was looking for. Teresa's memory lives on in every decision and every smile, inspiring them to live to the full. Their story, marked by sacrifices and renunciations, reveals the importance of overcoming fears and opening up to the unexpected. And so Alvaro and Camila embrace what Teresa always wanted for them, a life of authenticity with affection and the courage to face any challenge. Each new day reaffirms the bond that unites them, in an outcome that celebrates not only the love that has arisen between them, but also the legacy of the person who inspired them to live without fearing their own emotions. Over time, Alvaro and Camila transform the mansion into a welcoming place, where every corner reflects the joy and affection they share. They keep Teresa's memory alive in subtle details: a photo in the hallway, the plants tended in the garden, and a room dedicated to her memories. The mansion, once marked by silence and solitude, now pulses with the energy of a home. The change in Alvaro is revealed in every gesture. He, who once avoided any emotional ties, now shows the affection and tenderness he used to repress. Camila, noticing this transformation, feels a silent joy, knowing that she is helping him to open his heart authentically. Together, they create a routine of love and support, where mutual understanding sustains the relationship. On an autumn afternoon, Alvaro and Camila walk through the garden, observing the leaves that accumulate around the flowers. He, with a contemplative look, mentions how Teresa always said that the seasons reveal the stages of life. Each season teaches us something. He reflects, and I think we learn to recognize the value of each one. Camila, hearing Alvaro's words, agrees with a smile, recognizing the depth of the journey they have shared. She understands that alongside him, she has found more than a relationship. She has discovered a path of self-knowledge and growth. Together, they realize that love, cultivated with patience and courage, turns any place into a home. Life goes on for both of them with challenges and new discoveries, but each other's presence provides a haven of understanding and strength. They face the future with serenity, secure in the knowledge that every moment brings lessons, and that the love between them grows stronger over time. And so Alvaro and Camila move forward, honoring Teresa's legacy. They choose to live fully, facing whatever comes their way with the certainty that love builds the meaning they so desperately sought. Together, they find a reason to be grateful every day, certain that life with the one they love is the greatest achievement they could wish for.